It was one of those rare days in early summer when the taiga seemed to have taken a breath. The heavy, humid stuffiness that preceded the evening thunderstorm enveloped the hunting lodge of Ivan Belov, the gamekeeper. The Taiga River, swollen from recent rains, carried its muddy, fast-flowing waters, washing away the already loose clay banks. The air was so thick that even the cries of the seagulls seemed to stick in it. Ivan sat on the porch, methodically mending an old fishing net. The work was monotonous and calming. He was alone, but not lonely. The forest was his eternal, silent companion. That's why the first sound that broke the sleepy, heavy silence made him freeze. It wasn't the sound of the forest. It wasn't the crack of a branch under a bear's paw, the howl of a wolf, or the hooting of an owl. It was a high-pitched, piercing, almost panicked scream, like that of a child gone mad. It was so full of acute, unbearable panic that Ivan's heart involuntarily contracted. He put down his net. The sound repeated, this time closer, and it contained notes of rage and utter despair. Ivan stood up, his hand reaching for the rifle leaning against the wall, but he didn't take it. Something in that scream was not about danger, but about trouble. Something wet, dark and furious rolled out to the edge of the clearing, right up to the porch. It was an otter, an adult female. Ivan knew her. He had seen her several times that spring, watching her teach her young to swim at the distant rapids. Back then, she was the embodiment of grace, the playful and cautious spirit of the river. The creature now darting across his porch had nothing of that grace about it. It was insane. Her fur wasn't just wet. It was covered in thick, greasy yellow clay. She ran in circles on the wooden floor, her wet paws leaving dirty tracks. She squealed incessantly, that high-pitched, ear-piercing sound. She saw Ivan. For a moment she froze, her small, black, usually cheerful eyes now wide with terror. She made a new sound, like a desperate, stifled cough, and lunged at him. Ivan instinctively recoiled. But she wasn't aiming for him. She wasn't trying to bite his leg or arm. Her teeth, sharp as needles, sank into the thick, rough leather of his boot, and she pulled. She pulled with all the strength of her small but incredibly muscular body. She braced her hind legs against the porch, her body trembling with tension, and dragged him, growling and whimpering, toward the river. "What's wrong with you, mother?" Ivan muttered, stunned. He had never seen anything like it. It was a violation of all laws. The wild beast did not just come to the man, it came to demand, came to drag him away by force. He took a step, and the otter immediately let go of his boot. She ran a few meters to the path leading to the river, turned around, saw that he wasn't following, and let out another heart-rending scream. She ran back, grabbed his pant leg again and pulled. There was no doubt about it. She was calling him. Something had happened, something terrible. "Lead the way," said Ivan, taking his first step off the porch. The otter, as if understanding him, sprang from her place. She ran along the path, but not as usual, hiding, zigzagging. She ran, constantly looking back, waiting for Ivan to fall behind, and then urging him on again with her desperate cries. She led him to her home, to the very spot by the bend in the river where she had a burrow, her hut, under the roots of an old alder tree. Ivan walked as fast as he could, his heavy boots sinking into the rain-soaked ground. He already guessed what was going on. High water, clay. When they reached the bend in the river, Ivan realized that his worst fears had been confirmed. The scene was horrific. Where yesterday there had been a neat, dry entrance to the burrow, protected by intertwined roots, now there was just a wall of wet, heavy clay, stones torn from the roots of bushes and broken branches. The night rain and high water had done their job. The bank had given way. There had been a landslide. The entire front part of the bank where the burrow had been collapsed, blocking the entrance with a multi-ton mass of mud. The otter ran up to the rubble and began to gnaw at it. She dug her teeth into the clay in desperation, her little paws scraping at the wet earth, but it was like trying to dig through a mountain with a toothpick. Her claws were worn down to the bone. She was completely, tragically powerless. She ran up to Ivan, nudged his knee with her wet, dirty muzzle, and then ran back to the rubble, looking at him, her gaze clearer than any words. "You are big. You are strong. You can do it. They are there." Ivan approached the rubble and put his ear to it. At first, he heard nothing but the sound of the river and the desperate panting of the otter at his feet. He pressed his ear closer, holding his breath, and then he heard it. Barely audible, as if from beneath the water, came a thin, muffled squeak and a faint, desperate scratching. They were alive. They were called cubs. They were there, in this underground prison, locked up, and they were running out of air. "Quiet, mother," Ivan said, his voice hoarse. "Quiet. I'm here." He turned and ran. He didn't walk. He ran back to the hut. The otter rushed after him, whimpering, thinking he had abandoned her. But Ivan paid no attention. 5 minutes later, he returned. He was carrying heavy steel scrap metal, which he used to break the ice, and his old, well-used sapper shovel with a sturdy handle. He approached the rubble. He assessed the task ahead. The clay was sticky and heavy, and most importantly, it was dangerous. The whole mass was unstable. One wrong move, and a new layer of mud could collapse, burying both the cubs and himself. "Step back," he commanded the otter. He plunged the shovel into the wet ground. The battle began. It was a battle not for life, but for death, against time and against geology itself. The clay did not want to give way. It was like liquid cement. Each layer he dug up weighed at least 20 kilograms. It stuck to the shovel, and Ivan had to knock it off with his boot. Sweat poured off him, mixing with the mud. His shoulders, back, arms, everything burned with fire. But he didn't stop. He worked at a furious, desperate pace. And the otter, she didn't sit still. She turned into a small, crazed whirlwind. She didn't understand what he was doing. She thought he was attacking her. She threw herself at his feet, squealing so loudly that it hurt his ears. She ran up his back when he bent over and tried to help, grabbing the clumps of clay he threw away with her teeth and carrying them a meter to the side, thinking she was contributing. Be quiet, Ivan growled, waving her away. "I'm working," he dug. An hour passed in what felt like a minute. He broke through the top layer of clay, but the shovel hit something hard. Rocks, large river boulders, cemented together with mud. It was the core of the debris. He threw down the shovel and picked up a crowbar. He found a crack between the stones and drove the steel tip into it. He leaned on it with all his weight. The crowbar went deeper. He used it as a lever. The stone creaked but did not budge. The otter sat to one side and now watched him intently, her body trembling with nervous excitement. She no longer screamed. She waited. Ivan pushed again. His muscles screamed. He roared with tension just as the otter roared. "Come on!" The stone gave way. It moved a few centimeters. That wasn't enough. He worked with the crowbar for another half hour, risking the collapse of the entire structure at any moment. Each shift of the stone caused a small landslide from above, dirt falling down his neck, but he paid no attention. And suddenly, the crowbar fell into the void. He threw down the tool. He fell to his knees and began to rake through the remaining dirt and small stones with his hands. His fingers stumbled upon something warm and soft. A root. He pulled it out. A small black hole opened up, smelling of musty air. Ivan crawled away, breathing heavily. From the darkness of the burrow, blinking in the unfamiliar light, a tiny, wet, mud-covered nose poked out. Then the whole head appeared, and staggering, the first cub came out into the light of day. He was barely alive. He was trembling. He was blind from the mud and fear. Behind it came a second, and then a third. The otter cried out. But it was a completely different cry. It was a sound Ivan had never heard before in his life. It was a cry of absolute, all-consuming happiness. She rushed towards them. She forgot about Ivan, about the rubble, about everything in the world. She was a whirlwind of maternal love. She licked them. She turned them over. She nudged them with her nose. She cooed. She chattered. She made a dozen different sounds, checking to see if they were okay, if they were alive. She gathered them all into one trembling, squeaking ball and covered them with her body. Ivan watched this, and he had no strength left. He slid down the clay slope, his feet sinking into the cold river water. He sat there, covered in mud from head to toe, his hands bloodied, his back seemingly broken. He wiped the sweat from his face, leaving a dirty streak, and simply smiled. He sat there for about 10 minutes, coming to his senses, watching life resume. Finally, the otter finished its inspection. It gathered its 3 treasures and one by one nudged them toward the water. They were clean and incredibly alive. Ivan began to slowly get up, preparing to leave. His work was done, but the otter stopped him. She didn't make a sound. She just looked at him. She stood in the shallow water, and her 3 cubs lined up next to her in a perfect, straight line. 4 pairs of small, shining eyes looked straight at Ivan Belov. There was more gratitude in that silence than in all the words in the world. Ivan froze, not daring to break the moment. The mother otter looked at him for another second. Then, as if on a silent command, she and her 3 cubs simultaneously, in the same split second, dove underwater. There was a loud, synchronized, cheerful slap of 4 tails on the water. Splashes flew into the air, and 4 perfect circles remained on the surface of the river. It was a salute. It was their gratitude. It was their way of saying thank you in the only language they knew. Ivan Belov remained standing alone on the ravaged shore. He was knee-deep in water, dirty, tired, but he was smiling. On that day, the debt had been paid, and the Taiga, in the form of this small, desperate mother, showed him that trust and gratitude have no form or language.